Are you ready for the weekend yet? We have events, news, and a guest for you to enjoy this Lake Life weekend. Hey, welcome to another episode of Lake Life Weekend Podcast. I'm Dirk, I'm your host, and thank you for listening to us. Again, I'm really excited about today's interview. Actually, you have no idea because it took me really 2 years to get this appointment in the books. And today I am recording the full story of Zorbaz at the Lake with the son of the founder. Tom Hanson founded the company 50 years ago, and it was a big year and celebration. Lots of changes have happened in the past decade, and Cole Hanson is the owner of Lake Life Hospitality Group, which operates a total of 15 restaurants in Minnesota. And I mean, if Zorbaz isn't the Lake Life that we know and celebrate, I don't know what else is. So I'm very proud and happy to have Cole here with me later in this interview. So stay tuned for the full story. And also, question: were you able to come to Vegas last weekend? We had a really nice turnout. Thank you for whoever came to the Vegas Open Air at the ball field. It was a nice concert all evening, all night, and we just felt it was really good. Please let us know your feedback. Let us know how you liked it, what you did not like, because we would like to do it again. It should be an annual happening at the ball field there, and we need your feedback to do that. It would be greatly appreciated. So yeah, please also email us with any concerns, questions, ideas for our community. The Lake Life Weekend community is still growing, and we are very happy about that. We're working actually on our next fall magazine. It's going into print this week, and we will have it in a couple of weeks. It will be out and about everywhere where you regularly pick it up. If you would like us to mail one to you, we will send it in the mail. Email us hello@lakelifeweekend.com, and we'll make sure that you have your brand new fall copy of the Lake Life Weekend magazine. Yeah, I actually have nothing else to add. Go to our daily updated event schedule, lakelifeweekend.com, and enjoy our program here with us this week. Cole Hanson, the owner of the Zorbaz Group, Lake Life Hospitality Group from Detroit Lakes. Yeah, thank you. Have a great weekend ahead. Hello and welcome to our interview part. I'm here with Cole Hanson. Hi, Cole.
Hello, Dirk.
Cole is the son of Tom Hanson, the founder of the very first Zorbaz, and today Cole is the CEO and head of the Lake Life Hospitality Group, which owns a total of 15 restaurants in the state of Minnesota, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm very happy to have Cole with me here. I met him actually, little disclaimer, 3 years ago, I think, for the very first time. Pretty much right before we had our first expo.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I approached you and I won you over to be part of our little Lake Life storytelling. And I remember very clear after we met, I asked you if I have this new podcast project, and I asked you if I could interview you, and you said absolutely no. And I was and I was like really sad actually, and I think I never gave up. And just 2 weeks ago, I asked you again, and you said yes. And you're really making my day today, because I have been actually foreign to this Zorbaz lifestyle for majority of my life, because I'm not from here. Most people know I'm from Germany, and when I moved to Detroit Lakes area, I had really no idea what this Zorbaz thing was all about. But everybody was talking about it and said, "Hey, have you been to Zorbaz yet? Have you gone?" I was like, "No, I haven't. What is it?" And they say, "Oh yeah, it's that great place." I was like, "Okay, what, Mexican pizza. I was like, Mexican and pizza. I was like, it didn't really work well for me, I must admit. Only in America, but...
What if they would have said sauerkraut pizza? Would that have been better?
Good question. Actually, I don't like sauerkraut, so no, but you may have one on your menu.
We do.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
So I should try that for sure. No, I went there, and actually after I went there more often because I really enjoyed the atmosphere and obviously the energy, and it was a place where I could listen to music and see happy people, and I totally got it.
Well, thanks, Dirk. I appreciate it. We kind of like to describe Zorbaz as a pontoon ride. The conditions may not always be perfect, but it'll always be lively, and you should have a fantastic time.
Very cool. I like that analogy. I really like to speak in pictures too, and I like that.
Well, thanks.
Yes.
Well, it's great to be here with you, Dirk. Yeah, I mean, you are one of the most interesting men in Detroit Lakes. Kind of like the Spaten Optimator representative in the greater northern Minnesota area. Kind of the Dos Equis, the Dos Equis representative from Western Germany. I really love your space here too, Dirk. I know that I'm sure the listeners haven't been, maybe a picture hasn't been painted of kind of the cool little spot that you've created here in Perham. It's awesome.
Thank you.
It's very welcoming and stylish, with kind of an infusion of classic German sensibility.
Yeah, when I come into this office, I always think it cannot get more New York loft style in Perham ever, and I like our workspace here too.
No, that's a great way to describe it. This place, it's cool. It's really cool. I recommend people to stop in and check it out right in Main Street, Perham.
Thank you. Today I was gonna explore with you, because we have a very special year for you and your group. It's the 50th anniversary of Zorbaz. Your father founded the first location in Detroit Lakes in 1969.
He did.
And I was going to talk history. I was going to talk contemporary, and then maybe you give us a glimpse of what the future for the restaurants may look like. I know you also just opened a new location in Alexandria, Lure. So you are a combination of hospitality establishments, or like a number of them. So most interesting, though, I find, and maybe that's where we begin. How is it to grow up with a Z? Yeah, I mean, you have been practically in with Zorbaz your whole life. That's all you know. No, that's not all you know, but you know what I mean.
No, fundamentally, it's really all I've done professionally my entire life, and I started in the business at a very, very young age.
But wait, before,
please.
And I know you also you didn't live in Minnesota all your life. Tell us how much you want to share. Like, before we talk about your dad, and you run the company for 12 years now, you mentioned, as the CEO, and you've probably built it up to significantly growth compared to what your father started. But tell us about you. Where are you actually from, or how do you feel that? You're from Minnesota? You're from California?
Well, I'll kind of start with my parents' origin story. It may be best. And my mom and my dad founded Zorbaz in 1969. But prior to that, my dad was born in Detroit Lakes. He was born and raised just near Lake Melissa. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Lake Melissa, it's just south of Detroit Lakes, where the first Zorbaz started. And he was born there in 1945. He was raised there his entire life. And when he got to college to earn additional money, he had an older brother who went out to Southern California to become a cameraman for NBC. And he said, "Hey, Tommy, my father's name, why don't you come out to Southern California during your breaks and sell some cars, make some extra money, then buy a car, drive it back to Minnesota, sell it to make some additional cash." That was obviously, things were different then, and you could drive a car to Southern California and sell it, and then buy another car and drive it to Minnesota and sell it and make a little bit of money and pay your tuition at Morehead State and scrape by. So my dad was he was at Morehead State, and he was going out to Southern California during breaks and in the summer to work at a car dealership in the mid '60s. And then ultimately he met my mom in Manhattan Beach, California. My mom grew up in El Segundo, which is a suburb of LA. They met. He courted her, and she denied his advances many, many times. He obviously then broke her down, and they ultimately got married in Minnesota. Actually, they got married in Southern California in El Segundo in 1969. But prior to that, my mom did move back to Minnesota to be closer to my father, and she was a dental assistant at the local dental office in Detroit Lakes.
Okay.
And then my dad became a teacher, so he was teaching at the high school.
Really?
So in the late 60s, she was a dental assistant. He was teaching, and he wasn't sure if that's kind of what he wanted to do for on a long-term basis. So he sold my mom's Volkswagen Bug, and took out a loan from the bank with the help of my grandfather, my mom's dad, and bought Zorbaz on the city beach in Detroit Lakes for $17,000.
Oh, there was a Zorbaz existing.
No, it was a candy shop.
Oh.
When he bought it, and then he converted it into Zorbaz for the in the spring of 1969 for our first summer season. Where he kind of saw the opportunity there was that was.
Oh wait, candy shop, $17,000 is a lot of money in 1969.
It was. I could pop out my inflation calculator, but I won't. I don't know what that would convert to now. Maybe $100,000.
Oh, wow, still, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's a lot of money.
Something like that.
Wow.
Let me see. What
Must have
is
been a good running
in 1969? What did a Corvette sell for in 1969? Maybe $4,000. Maybe $3,000 or $4,000. Maybe I should speak. What did a Porsche sell for in 1969? Let's say
10.
Yeah,
I don't know.
maybe that was $3,000 or $4,000. So and now
Yeah.
they're 60 or 70.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was maybe the equivalent of 80, 90 grand
Wow.
at the time.
Okay. Quite a
So
risk.
he scraped that together. Where he saw an opportunity though, and Detroit Lakes had a very visionary mayor at the time, and they certainly still do, and have had many visionary mayors between then and now, but who really drove the vision of putting a city beach in at Detroit Lakes, and how that could be a differentiator for the community, and how it could help drive additional tourism and separate it from some of the other communities that Detroit Lakes was competing with. Your Alexandrias, your Bemidji's, Grand Rapids, the Brainerd Lakes area. So he put in that. So he kind of lifted that vision and took it to the top of the mountain, had that city beach put in, and obviously it really elevated the appeal of Detroit Lakes and really propelled the tourism industry in the town. And that's kind of what my dad had thought would happen. So he took advantage of the opportunity to buy the candy store, and he converted it into Zorbaz. And why he chose the name Zorbaz, there was a popular movie in the 60s starring Anthony Quinn.
Yeah.
And it was called Zorba the Greek. And the character played by Anthony Quinn loved to have a great time. He was fun-loving. He was carefree. And that was the personality that my dad wanted to infuse into his little northern Minnesota beer bar. He also thought the name was easy to remember, hard to forget, to kind of burn on the brain. So to kind of as a little marketing stunt, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Quite a marketing stunt.
So that was in '69, and at the time, then my dad submitted his. I think he may have taught for 1 or 2 more years.
What did he teach?
He taught speech, and he was the debate coach at the high school.
Oh, that's where the creativity maybe come from.
And he taught for maybe a year or 2 longer, and then he submitted his resignation because he thought there was an opportunity in a kind of a growing ski town in California known as Mammoth. I don't know if you're familiar with Mammoth. It's a couple hours from LA, but it's similar to Tahoe, but a slightly smaller scale, or any of the multiple resorts in Colorado, just on a smaller scale. But it was kind of on the cusp of exploding as well, or so my dad thought. So he moved up to Mammoth, and he bought a little piece of property there, and he decided to build a restaurant in Mammoth. And to do this, he ordered a kit. I don't know if these things exist now. You can order a kit to build a restaurant from scratch. So he orders this kit, and it's kind of in the style of a log cabin, and it's 2 stories.
Wow.
So this must have been the summer of 72. I was born in 1973, and in the summer when I was born at St. Mary's Hospital in Detroit Lakes, my parents brought me home to an old house that at the time sat behind Zorbaz.
So that was still in running and
But
operating.
so I digress. So my dad was in in Mammoth in Southern California building a restaurant via a kit that he'd ordered through the mail, and my mom stayed here in Minnesota to run Zorbaz for that particular summer. My dad builds a restaurant. He calls it's the Mogul, and it's a little steakhouse. But one of the funny little elements to it, after he built it, he had parts left over. So you don't, when you order a kit or if you have a model plane or a model car, typically you don't have parts left over. So he skipped. He may have lightly glanced at the instruction manual and then just kind of, it was free-formed the build out, I guess. So he builds this restaurant called the Mogul in Mammoth, California, and so that was open in the winter during the ski season for a few years.
Sure.
So then after that was built and operating, my mom would bounce back and forth with my father between Southern California in the winter, in Mammoth, and then Detroit Lakes in the summer to run Zorbaz. He ran the Mogul for, must have been 3 or 4 years, so this must be now 77, 78-ish or so. Mm-hmm. And forgive me if I get my timelines a little screwed up, and listeners, feel free to email me if you want to break this down. So he decides that his father-in-law, my grandfather, my mom's dad, who was basically, he lived in Southern California, and he owned a filling station in Malibu at the time.
But it's a filling station for
gas station.
Okay.
Yeah, and repair shop. But he had he was with Standard Oil at the time, and Dirk, I'm all over the place right now.
No,
I apologize.
I love it.
If you need to, get me back on track, if I derail slightly,
Zorbaz, Mogul,
all over the map. You could reach across this cool PV speaker and slap me in the face to get me back on track. But so now let me think about where I've got. You told me to paint the picture,
yes,
right?
Yes,
so
I love it.
I guess, hey, listeners, blame Dirk. This is his fault if this is the most rambling podcast of all time. So he's now my mom and dad, to get back to my the center of the story. They have Zorbaz in Detroit Lakes. They're operating that in the summer. They have the Mogul Steakhouse, which is in Mammoth, California, which is open in the winter. And it's like 1977 or 78. Now, my grandfather is running a service station in Malibu. He has a falling out with, I believe, Standard Oil was who he was partnered with. Oh. Standard Oil then terminated his franchise agreement, and basically, my grandfather had needed to find a new franchise partnership with a petroleum company, with a gas company, and he needed to find a location to put it. So he kind of found Palm Desert, California, which is in the Coachella Valley near Palm Springs. He opened up a gas station there, and then he mentioned to my father that he thought this would be a good opportunity to maybe look to open up a restaurant there. It was another emerging community. It was really starting to explode. Its profile was being raised, but land was still relatively cheap. And he just thought that opportunities were abound. So my dad said, you know what, that sounds like a great idea. So he sells the Mogul. And what's interesting about the sale to the Mogul, once again, I'm pivoting in a slightly different direction, but my dad's first hire at the Mogul was a gentleman named Dan. Dan's last name slips my mind, but what's interesting about this is Dan still owns the Mogul to this day.
Really?
One of my best friends from college was in Mammoth skiing recently, and he went to the Mogul for dinner, and he took a picture of it. So even though my dad didn't use all the pieces to build it, it's still standing, and the gentleman that he sold it to in the late 70s is still operating it. Wow. But what's fascinating about Dan, along with that, was he was my dad's first hire, and he had just graduated. I believe he went to Cal Berkeley, fantastic school. Yeah. And then he got an advanced degree at Stanford.
Oh, wow.
And then he goes to Mammoth, and he said, he's like, all I want to do is wash dishes.
He was so exhausted.
And my dad's like, okay, I guess if all you want to do is wash dishes, and even though you have like a PhD in mathematics from Stanford or something like that, I guess maybe you're slightly overqualified, just slightly, but we could massage you into the schedule to wash dishes. And then 5 years later, Dan moved into a leadership role, and then ultimately bought the Mogul from my father, and he still owns it to this day, which is cool. So my dad sells the Mogul to Dan. And Dan, if you're listening, if I apologize if that's not exactly your name. I'm pretty sure it is. If it's Daniel or if it's maybe David, and I'm short circuiting, but this pressure of this podcast, Derek, it's overwhelming. So then now we're in
moves to
Palm Desert, California. My dad found a piece of property there. He opened up a restaurant called the 19th Hole.
By a golf course.
It was it was by a golf course. Yes, I mean there's so many golf courses there, and in Palm Desert and Palm Springs, but it was on theme, right, with the valley.
Oh, okay.
So then that was in the late 70s. So my parents had the 19th Hole, which was just open in the winter.
Okay.
Sure. That's a very at the time it was a very seasonal area. Snowbirds would go there in the winter, but in the summer it would be so excruciatingly hot. It would be 110, 115, 120. So the majority of the population left at the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's changed a bit since then. But so they have the 19th Hole in the winter and Zorbaz in the summer. Zorbaz was open essentially Memorial Day to Labor Day, and the establishment in Southern California was open Labor Day to Memorial Day, effectively.
Yeah.
So then we would.
You were only 5 years old, 6 years old, and so you were the luggage.
I was the luggage.
You were coming along.
I was
you
the
had
luggage.
No school.
So I went to school in Southern California.
Oh.
That's where I went to. I started. My entire life, I was up through college. I bounced back and forth.
Yeah.
I spent all my winters in Southern California, in Palm Desert, and all my summers here in Detroit Lakes.
Okay.
So yeah, we would bounce back and forth, and then it. And the 19th Hole was. It started as the Coachella Valley, where Palm Desert was situated, continued to grow and expand. There became more and more opportunity there. So the 19th Hole then was open 12 months out of the year, and then the season, and then Detroit Lakes, the season started to expand at Zorbaz because more and more people. Detroit Lakes was growing, and more people were here in the winter.
Wasn't it?
Exactly.
Wasn't
so
it like the destination in the 80s for people to come?
Well, in the summer, I mean, it was. It's always been very, very. It's always been very, very popular, and a few things have led to ebbs and flows. My dad would tell me stories about when the drinking age went to 18 for a few years.
From 16 or down?
Well, you're in the U.S., Dirk. Remember, you're in the U.S. right now. We're not in Germany.
So when okay.
So that right now the drinking age is 21, obviously.
Oh yeah.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
But there was a time, and once again, forgive me, listeners, if I don't have my years exactly right, but there was a time, it must have been 82, 83, 84, where the drinking age was lowered to 18
okay.
for a couple years.
Okay.
So that, led to a bit of, there were some operational challenges and there was also opportunity. I mean, there was a new subset of people. There was a slight boom, right? Yeah. There was a new group of individuals that can now have a few beers who hadn't been able to do so before. So that kind of led to. That's just an example of there was opportunities come, opportunities go, but Detroit Lakes fundamentally was continuing to grow, and with that we continued to lightly expand the season at Zorbaz. We started opening like early May, then we started opening middle of April, then we started opening the middle of March, and then we started closing the middle of September, then the middle of October. So our season started to lightly expand, and that expansion began in kind of the mid 80s.
Okay.
Along with, we opened our second location in Perham here on Little Pine Lake in 1983. It's interesting. There's actually we actually have constant conversations within the company to include a couple of our first operating partners, some of our management team at Little Pine, on what year it actually opened. There's a debate whether it was 83 or 84. It was one of the two. It was either 83 or 84, where we opened Little Pine, and then from there it's just kind of been slow and steady growth. And then in the late 80s, actually the early 90s, 91 specifically, I had just graduated from high school. I graduated from high school in Palm Desert, California. Go Aztecs. And there was opportunity in both markets. There was opportunity in Southern California with the 19th hole, to continue to improve and expand. There was opportunity here in Minnesota, in the small central northern Minnesota resort towns where we like to do business, where we love to do business. There's opportunity in both areas, but both businesses, my father felt, were suffering slightly because, and he wasn't taking advantage of every opportunity that was presented because he was being pulled in too many different directions, having to bounce back and forth from Southern California to Minnesota. So part of the catalyst of my parents then settling in the upper Midwest in Minnesota on a year-round basis was they felt that there was better opportunity in Minnesota.
Okay.
I had graduated from high school. I have two brothers who were much younger than me, so they were all for it. They had
to move here.
They didn't care. They were enthusiastic to experience something new, see some snow, whip snowballs at one another, ice fish, snowmobile, ski. So they were pumped to do that, and so my parents said, "Hey, let's sell what we have in Southern California. Let's make Minnesota our home base, and let's truly focus on Zorbaz and see what opportunities are out there, and continue to slow and intelligently grow." So then my parents moved from Southern California with my two younger brothers to Minnesota, actually Fargo at the time, until for my parents for kind of my brothers to pursue the sports that they were really enthusiastic about.
Sure.
They missed the hockey opportunity because they grew up in Southern California. There wasn't a lot of hockey opportunity. So my parents moved to Fargo for my brother's schooling, and then my dad started focusing on what opportunities may lie with Zorbaz from a growth perspective. So now he has Zorbaz in Detroit Lakes, and now Zorbaz is open year round at the time. So we went year round in 1992.
Oh.
So prior to that, we were seasonal. Just started out Memorial Day to Labor Day, and now we opened up at the second Zorbaz in 1983 or 84, depending on who you talk to, back to some slow and steady growth. Then we opened.
Wait. Now before
Thank you
that,
for getting me back on track.
Yeah, no.
I've missed a few other openings.
Okay, you did. But my question was, and I want to backtrack just quite a bit almost. You called it the beer shack earlier. So let me actually. Now Zorbaz is pizza and nachos and food.
Mm-hmm.
It was originally a candy store.
Mm-hmm.
We learned how the name came about and your father's marketing talent,
Mm-hmm.
I should say, and speech. Actually, you have very verbal. Is that a term? Language advertisements. You work a lot with language. That may be the reason why he probably established that marketing.
The style.
Culture, style.
Mm-hmm.
The marketing style. But let me go back. So we had a candy store. So did you always just add pizza, or was it just actually a beer shack? Was it first just a bar? Because you mentioned the term beer and bar before I ever heard pizza.
Sure.
So how did Zorbaz actually became this colorful environment
Mm-hmm.
and such?
I appreciate you taking me back to the roots, and don't hesitate to interrupt me, Dirk, because I feel I don't want to hijack this conversation. And there are times I think some listeners may find you far more interesting than me.
No. It's all about it's good. So how did that happen? Was it?
So when we opened in '69, at the time, it was just we had Grain Belt beer on tap and frozen pizza, and that was
corner.
And that was it.
Something like that.
Right, exactly.
Really?
And when we started to move into broadening our offerings, focusing on fresh made product, and we make all of our products in house on a daily basis.
So the dough, everything is.
Our dough's made fresh throughout the course of the day. Our pizza sauce is made with vine ripened organic tomatoes out of Italy, and all of our toppings are proprietary toppings that are custom blends for us. Our cheese is 100% real. That's made specifically for Zorbaz. We cut all of our own veggies in house fresh. So
okay.
that certainly wasn't the beginning. But what brought us toward what kind of inspired us to move in that direction was my uncle.
Okay.
His name's Rick Jansen, and he had a pretty extensive culinary background, and then he married my dad's sister, and they, as a family, bounced back and forth with us as well. He ran both. He started running the kitchen in the establishment in Southern California, and he was my dad's first operating partner at Zorbaz in Detroit Lakes. And he was really he really had the vision to improve the quality of our product substantially. And he wrote all of our original recipes and was heavily influenced in the ethos of Zorbaz and what it is now, for sure.
And then it was a small. It always was added on, and it grew because you have a big footprint. I mean, you have quite a.
We do.
Disneyland.
Yeah, we've kind of it's been slow and steady, but we've been able to think adjust as the market has adjusted, and adjust as consumer demands change, and we've been able to now we're able to emphasize that which we think the market would like to see. It's about action, right? And I think in every community, action creates action, and you want to create what is appealing to those to attract them to our markets. And amenities are incredibly important, and we like to feature live music heavily at the majority of our locations.
So at the Detroit Lakes location, is that candy is not there anymore? None of the structures. I mean, I know you just remodeled last year substantially, but is it still there? Was it there?
It is. So when you walk through the front doors, that is the original structure.
Really?
Mm-hmm. That is the original structure. It's fascinating. So, and trying to paint this picture, even though this is a podcast, obviously. So no one's watching. But as you walk into Zorbaz, Dirk, and you head towards what we call, it's kind of old school Zorbaz.
Okay.
That's the original bar to your right, and there's that's the interior, where all the high tops sit, if you will.
In the middle there.
That was the original structure. Okay. So that was the original candy store. On the perimeter of the building now, where there's a collection of approximately 12 booths.
Okay.
My father actually built that structure as well, and he always liked to. He had 6-inch frost footings. I don't know if you're. And I'm not.
On the ground.
Right. I mean, I'm not a contractor, but he always found it funny that he put in 6-inch frost footings, and now, certain requirements are much more than that, and the building is still standing. And once again, he wasn't. Construction wasn't his forte, as I explained. But hey, he's 2-0 from a construction standpoint.
Tell us about growing up as Cole, the son to Tom, and he must have been very energetic. Was he funny? Was he strong? I mean, he had a lot of help. He just his brother-in-law became the chef, helped him. So he was
Correct.
Not a culinary. So your dad probably was artistic. He was creative. He was entrepreneurial. And how was it to watch that? I mean, now you are the entrepreneur, and now you probably apply a lot of, I assume, and we haven't even touched on your academia. I think you went to university in California, didn't you? Didn't you have an accounting background?
I went to the University of Notre Dame.
Oh,
yeah,
even better.
Yeah, South Bend, Indiana.
Yeah,
go Irish.
Yes, yeah. I visited the campus, and actually Kenny Nelson went to.
He did.
I had him in this podcast too. So I admire both of you. Okay, yeah. So you have a business background.
I do.
So but you are applying the entrepreneurial energy that was spoon-fed to you. Tell us, how was it watching an entrepreneur like your dad?
Well, my dad is the ultimate hype man, I guess, for not in a snake oil salesman kind of way. Man? He's out to pump up the crowd.
Okay.
Right.
Entertainer.
He's an entertainer. He kind of had a he passed away a few years ago.
Okay.
After a long fight with cancer, but I mean, he definitely one of his taglines that he liked to use from a promotional standpoint is "Life should be gulped, not sipped." And that was definitely something that he embraced with open arms. He was a larger than life personality, and when he walked in a room, you definitely knew he was there, and his presence was felt. But in a very gregarious, welcoming,
charming,
charismatic kind of way. And his nickname was many years ago. His friends dubbed him Jumbo. Was his nickname.
Okay.
And not only because he was a big dude. It's about 6'6", 280 pounds, kind of a grizzly bear build, but it was also because of his personality. So he was not only larger than life, figuratively, but literally, through his personality and charisma. We just had last week. We have a party for our staff every year. We close all 15 of our locations, and we descend on the beaches of Gull Lake at Cragun's Resort.
Yeah.
We just did that last Tuesday, and we call it Jumbo Palooza, which is kind of that. So that's the origin story of the name. It's kind of certainly it's a day to first and foremost to celebrate our staff. Our staff, they throw a great party for our guests on a daily basis. So it's a day for my partners and I to throw a great party for our staff. But it's also a day to metaphorically high-five my dad, for sure. So that's Jumbo.
Yeah.
And you asked kind of what he was like and what it was like, growing up with a larger-than-life personality. It was awesome. And one thing that he always emphasized for me, and as well as my younger brothers, number one, positivity. And that was I don't think a day went by that he didn't tell me that some version of hey, we live in a vortex of positivity, Cole, and it's just, hey, you create your own, you create your own headspace, and you're in control of your own destiny, right? And we're not beholden to the whims of factors beyond our control, right? We're in control.
Okay.
And also a resourcefulness. he would. It's just like, Cole, you got to be resourceful. Figure it out. He was always there. He was always guiding with a very fatherly, light touch. But he certainly, he wasn't afraid to let me scrape up an elbow every now and then, so that I wouldn't scrape my elbow later. But he was an awesome dude. A gigantic personality, fantastic father, and a great mentor, and I miss him.
Yeah.
I miss him.
Yeah.
So, but
But
you were right about, from a marketing standpoint, and where he grew. Frankly, he grew up with absolutely nothing. My grandfather, his father, just worked for the Department of Transportation his entire life. He helped build Highway 59, the new Highway 59. Those that may be from the area remember when that project took place, I believe in the late 50s, early 60s. So they didn't have much, if anything, but that didn't stop my dad from swinging from the fences. He had some misses, but he had a lot of hits too.
Huh.
He wasn't afraid to experiment and take risks. So I think that's something that intelligent risks, of course.
And he was wise, I believe, to get in talent. Yeah, he got partners.
Absolutely.
And so he grew his company with the help of many.
Absolutely.
So,
and that's one thing that I don't know if I would have had. I don't know if I would have had the. I don't know if wherewithal is the correct word, but if I would have had the vision to do what he did from a structure standpoint, I think I learned a lot from him, and I'm certainly learning every single day from the great people that I work with. But to provide an opportunity of partnership was incredibly smart from his standpoint. So all of our locations, I have an operating partner at each location who has a substantial interest in the business. So that I think all my partners, they certainly, not only are they fantastic people who are well educated, professional, and detail focused, but they're incentivized through ownership, and that was entirely established by my father. I think that was very, very smart structure.
So that's the concept.
From his point.
They buy in, and they live the restaurant, the operation.
Mm-hmm. It's theirs. I certainly work hard to provide them with all the tools that they need to succeed, and to provide with near-term and long-term strategy, and communicate what we're trying to accomplish. But their success, is predicated upon their talents.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when you took over, was there 8 restaurants in the portfolio, and you added 7, or how many did you add, or what happened?
So we can back up a little, back to the we'll go to the
Fargo.
We're back in the late 80s now. No, we'll just take this to the early 90s. Yes. But in the late 80s, while we were still in Southern California in the winter and Minnesota in the summer, we opened Zorbaz on Little Pine in either 83 or 84. We opened Zorbaz on Pelican Lake.
Oh, yeah.
which is just outside, about 14 miles from Detroit Lakes. We opened on the northwest shores of Pelican in 1987.
Mm-hmm.
And then we opened Zorbaz in Ottertail Lake, which is about 20 miles outside of Fergus Falls, in 1988.
Mm-hmm.
And then we opened
six.
exactly. But now all of these locations, and this kind of helps, put in context why, my father felt he was being pulled in several directions, and he needed to. It would be best for the long term, best for the business long term if he were in one place, whether that be Minnesota or California. And then in 1989, he opened up a location in Cross Lake, Minnesota, on Cross Lake, which is about 25 miles north of Brainerd. It's on Cross Lake is in the Whitefish chain.
Yes.
So he opened that in 1989.
Not Park Rapids.
No, Park Rapids opened in 2005.
Ah, okay.
So now there's 5 Zorbaz, all just open in the summer, primarily Memorial Day to Labor Day with a slightly extended season in Detroit Lakes, and then 2 restaurants in Southern California. Now it's 1991. I graduate from high school. My parents decide they need to be in one place. They choose that place to be Fargo in the winters, essentially. And not many people winter in Fargo. I guess they do if they have a cabin. That makes sense. Yeah. And then they spend their summers in Detroit Lakes. And that's 1991. And then my dad, he wasn't afraid to take risk, and he needed to experiment and see, and maybe have a proof of concept and refine exactly what he was looking for with Zorbaz, how the concept was going to evolve. So then he opened up a little space in Fargo. There was a nightclub called The Rock, which isn't there any longer. It's near West Acres, but they had a kitchen space there that Zorbaz took over in '93. So he experimented with the Fargo market lightly. He opened up a location in Pine River, Minnesota, as well, in '93, and then he opened up a location in Mille Lacs.
Okay.
On Lake Mille Lacs in '94.
Every year.
Ultimately, those three their experiments. Pine River was kind of in Main Street, downtown. Not on the water. Yeah. Different vibe, obviously. Mille Lacs was relatively speaking, off the lake, limited lake access, on a really, really busy freeway. Great exposure, but it turned out to be more drive-by country. People want to get to their destination. It's not necessarily a place where you would want to stop. Sure. Is kind of what we learned. And then the Fargo market, it's just essentially he learned that the scale wasn't there at those 3 businesses in those 2 locations with those 3 slightly modified approaches to site selection. So then in '98, when we opened Zorbaz on Gull Lake, is when we closed those 3 locations just to kind of focus our efforts on the rollout of our new location, which at the time in '98 that was the biggest undertaking we'd ever attempted, was opening the location there. Yeah, as far as how big it's the size, the scale, the scope, the investment.
Okay, it's huge. Or I don't know. I haven't been there.
It's a big location. Okay. It's an awesome market. I love all of our markets. They're all equally awesome. People ask me, Cole, which location's your favorite? And my answer is always, do you have a favorite child, right? Yeah. You love them equally but differently, right? Yeah. I love them all equally but differently. They're all unique and they have their own personality. So so then we opened up Zorbaz on Gull Lake in 1998, and that's where I graduated from college in '95, and then my dad wanted me to go and work in the real world for a few years. So I did, and it was a great, it was a fantastic experience. I feel like I got my my master's degree in business, real life, rather than in the sanguine halls of a university somewhere in the Northeast, right, or the Upper Midwest. So then I came back into the fold in '98.
Oh, you just took 2 years off?
I was 3 years. I was working for a company that at the time there was. The casual dining segment had exploded.
Okay.
So I'd started with a business it's called Don Pablo's Mexican Kitchen was the name of the company. They're now bankrupt. So I guess I made the right decision to move on. But I started with them while I was in college in South Bend, and they were expanding very, very aggressively. And so then I moved to the Minneapolis market and helped open, let me see, I think we had 8 locations in the greater Minneapolis market.
Wow.
In between the years of 95 to 97.
Mm-hmm.
And the intention was to continue working with them, or a like company for a few more years, continue to glean what they do exceptionally well, maybe, learn about what their weaknesses may be and apply them to make our family business the best version of itself it could possibly be. But when the Gull Lake opportunity came about, it was something that was just, it's a wonderful opportunity but it was just too much for my father to bite off and chew on his own.
Okay.
So then I came back in 98 to help open up Zorbaz on Gull Lake. So
then you got really involved besides busing and cleaning. So then you got hands-on in the operational part of the group.
Right. So I helped open up Zorbaz on Gull Lake. And then at that point, from my experience within the company, I was an operating partner at Zorbaz on Pelican Lake from 99 to 2004.
After Gull Lake?
After Gull Lake.
5 years, so you...
okay,
so you were hands-on there.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
And then I would be, helping, continue then building relationships with the operating partners, helping provide them with the tools that they need to succeed, learn, what our strengths are, try to identify what our weaknesses are and improve upon them. So that's 98. We opened up Gull Lake, and I was an operating partner at Pelican for quite a few years, and then we opened up Park Rapids, which you referenced in 2005.
Question now.
Yes.
We have all those locations, and they're all, or the majority is right on the water's edge, or very close.
Yes.
I wasn't really aware of that until I visited many places. I have been in DL, Park Rapids, Pelican Lake, Pine, Ottertail.
Yeah, we met at Ottertail last week for a cocktail.
Yeah. And then
actually, you were drinking tonic.
Yes, thank you. And
I was having a couple cocktails.
I was going to say.
I was punched out though.
It was.
I like to experience the locations from the guest perspective, right? You want to breathe the air, and you want to try to see what the guests see, and
absolutely.
And how can we improve the
experience.
How can we improve the experience? How can we improve the dynamics of pouring a Red Bull vodka, which is what I was consuming that day. Thanks for driving me home too. I appreciate it.
No problem. Anytime. So do you always obviously building code 1971, setback regulations. My point is, were you always taking over restaurants that failed, or like how were you able to get so close to the water's edge?
Yes.
So
exactly. There's because building codes change, and we understand. And there's there's shoreline impact zones, and there's impervious, and ordinances that are in place. And but some of our locations, they're so unique, and
just old resorts or old restaurants.
Old restaurants, old resorts, a candy shop, right?
Yeah, of course.
There was a Zorbaz on Pelican was a repurposed storage building for boats. So my dad really took a unique approach to finding all of his locations. We'd really like to, and now more than anything, and through some of our failures, I think it's helped us, sharpen exactly what we're looking for. And we know that we don't want to do business in the urban jungle, the concrete jungle, if you will. We always want to smell that lake air, feel the breeze. We're focused on central and northern Minnesota resort towns, on I like to call them heavily recreated party lakes. We want lakes with personality, and people that are passionate about their lake. They're passionate about their community. That's who we want to be there and serve, and those are the communities that we want to be a part of. The ones vibrant, that they have a heartbeat and a personality and a point of view.
I think Zorbaz shaped pretty much maybe the character of a lake, even because before I even knew it, I lived in Fargo first, and then I had was like, oh yeah, I want to be on Ottertail Lake, close to where that Zorbaz is. And again, like back then, I had no clue what that even meant. But,
well, that's cool to hear.
But it was really cool, and it's just you're an institution, we say in the German language. I know you're an institution, you're a culture. It's really a culture, and you are a brand. I mean, you are Lake Life. So when you took over and going backwards now, we arrived at Park Rapids 2005.
Correct.
So you own since 2007.
2007 is when I purchased the company from my parents. Yes.
So you took over, and you had 8 restaurants. Then I was pretty close when you bought.
That sounds correct.
Okay, so you almost doubled.
7. Well, we have we purchased. So you mentioned at the beginning our. It was all happenstance that we named our companies almost the exact same thing, which is hilarious.
Yeah. I didn't even know Lake Life Hospitality.
But I mean, obviously it makes sense, and you'll hear from my lawyers later.
Yeah, I know.
You can fight it though. You're a lawyer yourself. So Lake Life Hospitality Group, we have the 11 Zorbaz, and then we have 4 what we call our alternative concepts. So the Fireside and Detroit Lakes on Detroit Lake, Longbridge, which is also on Detroit Lake.
My favorite.
Thanks. And
Shoreham.
Hotel Shoreham, which is on Lake Sally in the village of Shoreham. And then Lure Lake Bar in Alexandria. We purchased the Fireside in 2005 as well.
Oh, that long ago.
And then I then purchased the company from my mom and dad in 2007. And then we opened up Zorbaz on Pokegama in Grand Rapids in 2007 as well. And then 2009, we opened up Zorbaz on Big Sandy, which is in McGregor, Minnesota. And then 2011, 2012 actually, we opened up Zorbaz on Green Lake in Spicer, which is about 100 miles northwest of Minneapolis, St. Paul. That's our closest location. Or both Spicer and Alexandria are both about 100 miles from Minneapolis, St. Paul. Maybe the Alexandria locations are a little bit further, but that's one of the 2 closest locations to the cities. And then and then Zorbaz in Alexandria in 2013. So we've just kind of since 2005, we've kind of opened up a new location or acquired an existing location every 2 to 3 years. Basically has been the rhythm of the business to this point.
So fascinating to me is that I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't see an individual woman or man wearing a Zorbaz item, whether it be a shirt, a hoodie, or a hat, year-round. So when did your father add already? I mean, I know it's normal in America that there's like T-shirts being sold at an establishment, not so much in Germany, but at all actually. But you are also a fashion item, like you're a lifestyle. So when did that happen? That people actually really identify themselves with the Zorbaz experience. That's how I see it. It's fascinating.
I appreciate that. And there's nothing that puts a bigger smile on my face than seeing someone walking around in a Zorbaz sweatshirt. I mean, obviously, independent of how much I love my girls and my wife.
Yeah.
Girls, if you're listening, you put a smile on my face every single day as well.
You have 2 daughters.
I do. But it's awesome. It's awesome. And how did it happen?
How did that happen?
That's a great question. Some things you wish you could bottle it and then recreate it and or sell it. And I would like to hopefully it's because of the personality of the locations. I think it's because of the fantastic job my partners do, the pride that our staff takes in. We say we want every single guest that walks through our doors, number 1, to feel like the most important person on the face of the earth, and number 2, we want them to leave with a smile on their face. And if we're accomplishing that, I think we're doing a lot good, right? We also, really, we want to serve delicious food. We want people to have a fantastic experience. You mentioned that in the beginning. It's a vibe, it's a personality, it's an experience.
Something to look forward to. That's what they look forward to.
And right, and maybe it's a lifestyle, right? And I think if maybe people like to wear a sweatshirt. I'm wearing a Zorbaz sweatshirt now because it says something about you. It says that, hey, I like to hang out at the lake, and I have a personality, and I like to have fun, and I'm a cool person.
Who designed the first items? Was it your dad? Did he come up? Like, how did that happen? Because fashion, I mean, I see shirts of yours which are just like really, really good, and I'm really impressed. I love it. Did your dad come up with this first items? Like
Initially,
was it somebody?
so we really started. I mean, he got in. He started selling T-shirts right away.
Oh, okay.
And I think in the '69, early '70s, and I think that he pulled a lot of that from the experiences they had in Southern California.
Okay.
Hanging out on the beach. I think
sure.
all the little the beer bars in Manhattan Beach or Hermosa Beach, Huntington Beach. They were all tank tops and flip flops.
Oh, sure.
And you could maybe at the time you could buy a muscle shirt, right, or a T-shirt.
Right.
Throw on a visor or whatever it may be, and a lot of the personality that he wanted to infuse into Zorbaz, particularly the first location on the beach, was obviously much smaller at a much smaller scale, and he was kind of an early adopter.
So he was
to
inspired.
He was inspired by a lot of the Southern California beach vibe.
Okay.
That he was the air that he was breathing during his breaks and during the summer when he was in college.
Okay.
So then he started selling T-shirts right away, and I think my dad always had ample style and ample personality, and so he really took that upon himself until the early '80s when we partnered with Lake Shirts.
Okay.
And I know we were one of their first customers, and have been for what is that, almost 40 years.
Yeah.
And now they certainly take the lead in presenting us with garments I think would be good fits for our concepts.
Okay. And the advertisements, the slogans, like there's a Z or like your dad wrote a lot of that script back in the day?
He did, and so the transition, and this is something else that's constantly debated. Debated very obviously. They're friendly debates, of course. When did we start really ramping up the use of Z's in place of S's? And we think it was sometime in the late '80s when that started, and that was kind of inspired by my mom. My mom kind of saw the classic Superman icon.
Yeah.
And thought that that would work well. We were inspired by that. We tweak it, add a Z, and start throwing that all over the place. As a certainly that's something that's hyper recognizable and hyper associated with our business and with our personality. That was my mom. So it was kind of, I guess it was an amalgamation of my mom and my dad and our early employees, and everyone had a voice. Right.
Yeah.
And, it's one of those things, and you hear it, you may hear it flippantly in corporate boardrooms, which we don't have one. We're very lean. We're a very lean organization at the top. But, we want to, there's no such thing as a bad idea. Let's hear it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
Huh. And I can only imagine, like you mentioned once, you have over 1,000 helping hands during a summer. I think you said 1,400 people working through the season at all Zorbaz, at all the restaurant locations. Is that true? Like
during peak season in July.
Yeah.
We'll have right around 1,200 staff members.
That is just amazing, and I cannot believe how much it kind of grew and where it grew to. Is there more growth? Are you thinking like, hey, we may want to go? I don't know. Are you still looking for new destinations?
Absolutely. I kind of mentioned beforehand what we look for in a town, basically, or in a lake, or in a specific market. We're going to be in central and northern Minnesota. We want it to be a resort town. We want the lake to be heavily recreated and have a party personality, right? And by party personality, it's, hey, you've got people, pontoons are packed and they're heading out to the sandbar to throw the frisbee and let the dog run around and and maybe have a bottle bass, right? I mean, that's what we're looking for, and so those are unique. And we also want our locations to be on the water, and there aren't a lot of those. So it's trying to find the right market, the right lake, and the right location, zoned properly at the right price. So that's a confluence of lots of 5 unique line items that. It's hard to find, but we're not going to stop looking.
Mm-hmm.
And if the right opportunity presents itself, we'd absolutely continue to grow intelligently.
So, like with have you ever considered to like even taking over like a whole resort or like I'm not sure. Like I mean, like you can. I mean, your platform is speaking for itself. So, but you could do anything. I mean, you could even have a. I mean, look at Hard Rock Cafe or something. I mean, I don't even understand the Hard Rock Cafe concept. I mean, like really, but like you could have a hotel.
Right.
I mean, you with because you.
I do have a hotel. There just aren't any rooms, right, at the hotel showroom. It's fascinating.
True.
We get calls all the time of people that want to book rooms.
Oh really?
And I guess it makes sense.
Yeah.
It used to be a hotel, but that location has there's so much history there. There's such a wonderful legacy at that location.
Yeah.
The personality of the place can't be duplicated. And when I bought the Hotel Shoreham in 2014 from Rick Lynch, who actually started the Hotel Shoreham, I believe, in 1971. So just 2 years after my father started Zorbaz. So they always had a healthy competition, and I always enjoyed Rick immensely. He was a fantastic businessman. And the first thing that he did, I think that was really smart, is just to continue to name it. He stuck with the name Hotel Shoreham, even though there were no longer any rooms. And but it was such a cool spot with a fantastic history, with what became very, very, very passionate fans of the brand.
What's with the hotel with the rooms? Can you see that?
No, so thanks for getting me back on track, Dirk. You need to do that more often. I like to joke that I'm the least diversified person on the face of the earth. It's simply restaurants. That's what I do. I think that's where as a company where our expertise lies, and we're certainly not going to continue to get up every single day and become better at our craft. But right now, I think we're hyper focused on making Lake Life Hospitality, making Zorbaz and Lure, Longbridge, the Hotel and the Fireside, the best version of themselves they could possibly be. So that's really our focus, and then potentially identifying other opportunities to whether expand Zorbaz or find a legacy brand that's doing exceptionally well that that maybe is looking for an ownership change.
To integrate
different leadership to integrate into the group. Exactly. I want to continue to create opportunities for the great people that I have working with me. That's another driving factor too.
How do you find talent? I mean, and nowadays we are always concerned on how to find talent. For example, if you see an opportunity like to take over a restaurant is one thing, and let's say buying a book of business, or I mean to keep the atmosphere and the lifestyle, it's often connected with the person who's running it. So that must be very difficult.
No, you're absolutely right. It's amazing how each one of my locations, even though they are, I mentioned that we try to provide them with all the tools that they need to succeed. We want our alternative concepts to have their own distinct personality, and their own distinct vibe, but we're always going to focus on the hospitality element, and there isn't any deviation from across all 15 locations and 5 different brands and concepts of making sure that every single guest feels like the most important person on the face of the earth, making sure that every single guest leaves with a smile on their face, empowering my staff to solve problems that may be brought to their attention. That's our ethos. That's maybe to throw a little German in there, that's kind of the zeitgeist of our company, right?
That's zeitgeist.
I've been waiting to use that. So we don't deviate from our purpose, our mission, our values. But each location does take on its own little unique personality that is that reflects the operating partner, which is cool as well. I mean, you'll have people that say, well, Zorbaz on Pelican is my favorite Zorbaz, or Zorbaz on Little Pine Lake is my favorite Zorbaz, and I think that's cool. It's because they're not cookie cutter. Right. They're all unique in their own way, which I think is something that we're going to continue to emphasize.
Maybe that's also part of the success, because they're not just like always the same.
It could be.
They're always, I mean, obviously location, but yes, the vibe, and I agree. I can see that, because obviously you're extremely successful. I mean, 50 years in business and a great following, and people love to carry your brand. I mean, that's also one of the most beautiful feedbacks a business owner can have. Yeah, people.
It is flattering, and I mentioned it that very few things make me smile as big than seeing someone maybe in an airport. In Las Vegas wearing a Zorbaz sweatshirt, as an example. Not that I spend much time in Las Vegas. But you had mentioned, how do I find people? All of my operating partners, I mentioned all 15 locations have an operating partner on site who has a substantial portion of the business. They've all come from within the organization. I'll give an example. Like my operating partner at Zorbaz in Detroit Lakes is Tate Jansen, who is my father's first operating partner's son. So like me, when Tate was born, his parents then moved into the house that used to exist behind Zorbaz. That's now the main stage for our live music performances.
Oh, really?
They brought him home to that house as my parents brought me home to that house 4 years earlier. So our partner here at Zorbaz on Little Pine Lake in Perham, his name Mike Netland. He started washing dishes at Zorbaz in Detroit Lakes when he was 14. Our operating partner at the Hotel Shoreham, Scott Schulte, he started working the pizza line when he was 14 at Zorbaz on Pelican Lake. So those are kind of examples of, where did the origin of my operating partners and what we're looking for, and as I mentioned, creating opportunities within the company. If you want to, and anyone out there, if you want to live in northern Minnesota and you want to be in hospitality and you're passionate about it, call me. I've got a place for you. We'll weave you in. We'll hopefully we'll train you well. And you'll have a fantastic time, and the sky's the limit. Yep. Yeah. Opportunities abound.
Yeah, I love it. When I met you during the past 3 years, you were always very humble and not shy, but I'm very happy to see the true passion when I've never spoken about your business so much as today, and I think it's a big part of the success forthgoing after 2007, because you live, breathe, and you are the soul that you were given by your father and your mother, who grew this business. So I can now understand really. I thought you were more a numbers person, actually. Then I must admit that I experienced you today. So I hope that many more can feel the passion that you probably are carrying on from your father's origin for this restaurant. I mean, the pizza place. It's amazing.
Well, thanks, Dirk. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's very fascinating, and it's such a unique story that I'm so happy to be able to have captured. And is this just the beginning? Yeah. So you're shy of. Are you thinking your children may continue to grow and do something out of it? What are you thinking?
We'll see. I mean, my girls are very young.
Yeah.
8th grade and 4th grade. So
okay.
They have a lot of life to live. But I certainly it would be.
But you're young too.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's nothing that would make. I'm certainly my mother and my father happier than to see this continue to be a family business. That's something that was always very, very important to them.
Okay.
So we'll see. I'm certainly not going to discourage it. And my oldest daughter is already working at Zorbaz.
Really?
And she loves it, which obviously thrills me. I started when I was 5 washing dishes, and
you did.
Yeah, certainly. Child labor laws don't apply to families, so my mom and dad.
I know.
My mom and dad took advantage of that opportunity. But I was. I've learned a lot. I won't stop learning.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy that I'm able to follow you and be a part of the stories as often as you share, and especially this one. And I'm excited to see another one of the locations. I was just at Lure 2 weeks ago, and I really loved it. I loved that you just converted an existing restaurant completely into this environment. If you haven't been there, it's really it's a totally different environment. But I was wondering if you will try kind of like your father, your 19th hole and the Mammoth, so you can apply other restaurant vibes.
Right. What's nice is because that's right across the street from Zorbaz in Alexandria, and so we certainly want to create concepts that complement one another.
Yeah.
And I think that the team had accomplished that with the opening of Lure Lake Bar.
Yeah.
Yes.
Really cool.
But thanks for making the trip down there, Dirk.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I had to see it. Yeah. Well, that's how we usually close our interviews. How do you like to spend your lake life? Like the personal, you, your wife, your family. What's your definition of lake life besides Zorbaz?
Sure. No, of course. Well, I mean, there's nothing better than spending the day on the water, right?
Right. So you're on the water.
Absolutely,
you're a boat person?
as much as possible.
Boat?
Absolutely. Yes.
You have a pontoon or you have a
kind of?
surfboard?
It's we love to pontoon.
Yeah.
It's the best.
Yeah.
It's the best.
So you are cruising.
Absolutely.
So you're
Laid back.
So you're doing okay? Yeah. No, absolutely. You're
Just like laid back, just like Coolio. Are you familiar with Coolio, the rapper?
Yeah, absolutely.
Modern day philosopher.
1996, when I was a foreign exchange student, Coolio was pretty big.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Good.
I wasn't born, so remember 99.
I wasn't sure if you
Coolio.
only knew the band Scorpion.
From Hanover. It's a German band.
Yes, yes.
Scorpion, yeah. Scorpions. Yeah.
Or Berlin, perhaps. Actually, they're an English band, aren't they?
I don't, probably, but Rammstein.
Of course.
German.
We could go on and on.
Nena.
99 Luftballons, right?
99 Luftballons, ja, genau.
Or who sings? Falco.
Falco. Well,
Yeah.
he was Austrian, I think.
Yeah.
Amadeus.
Yeah.
Amadeus. Like you.
Rugby Amadeus. Yeah. I did my research for this. You're not the only one doing research.
You really you love entertainment too, then obviously, I mean, provingly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we have, this upcoming weekend at Zorbaz in Detroit Lake, so it is our 50th anniversary party this weekend.
So music is back.
Yeah, we have on Friday the Crop Dusters take the main stage, and then on Saturday we're featuring Hardwood Groove.
Okay.
We're gonna have a bunch of cool specials. We have our own Summer of '69 American ale with lemon zest brewed by Bent Paddle out of Duluth for us.
Really?
So we'll be pouring a lot of those. So we certainly encourage all the listeners to, those that are still in Minnesota who haven't fled for the impending winter, come out to Zorbaz. You'll have a great time.
Yeah, it's exactly
Celebrate
this weekend.
50 years. It is.
Because we are airing this or pushing this right after you
Oh,
leave.
perfect.
So I'm putting
Perfect.
this
Yes, I
right
should have
out
asked
there.
when this will air. Fantastic. I appreciate that, Dirk.
Yeah, so thank you so much for coming, taking the time to be with us. That was really one of the most fascinating interviews I had so far, so thank you. It was worth the wait of 2 years.
Well, my pleasure, and I apologize that my answers were more shotgun and less
All good.
and less sniper-like.
Love it.
Thanks, Dirk.
Thank you. Have a good weekend. Yeah, this was already our newest episode of the Lake Life Weekend podcast. We sure hope you enjoyed it. Tune in again next week with another great guest and updates. Always check out our website, lakelifeweekend.com, and if you have some comments, please feel free to email us at hello@lakelifeweekend.com, and you have a wonderful weekend ahead.